When my grandfather died, my entire family celebrated. Not because they loved him, because they thought they had finally gotten his money. They laughed when I inherited nothing. But a few hours later, a stranger placed an old package in my hands and said, "Your grandfather told me to hide this for 27 years. After I opened it, my family's celebration turned into something none of them could have imagined. If you enjoy stories like this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. My name is Ethan Carter, and I'm 29 years old. My grandfather, Richard Carter, was the kind of man people respected the moment he walked into a room. He built a successful construction business from scratch and spent over 50 years turning it into a multi-million-dollar company. To the outside world, he was a respected businessman. To me, he was simply Grandpa. Every Sunday I visited him. We played chess, talked about life, shared stories. Sometimes we'd sit on his porch for hours watching the sunset. Those afternoons became the best memories of my life. The rest of my family wasn't interested in those things. They were interested in one thing: his money. As Grandpa got older, family gatherings became uncomfortable. Conversations always seemed to drift toward his properties, investments, or business. My Uncle Victor was the worst. He acted like the inheritance already belonged to him. "If Grandpa gives me the lake house," he'd say, "I'm tearing it down and building something modern." My grandfather would simply stare at him without responding. My cousin Blake wasn't much better. Every time he visited Grandpa, he somehow found a way to ask about the will. The older Grandpa became, the greedier everyone seemed. He noticed it too. One afternoon, while we played chess, he looked at me and said something I never forgot. "Ethan, money doesn't reveal who people are. I moved a pawn." "What do you mean?" He smiled sadly. "It reveals who they've always been." At the time, I thought he was talking generally. Years later, I realized he was talking about our family. When Grandpa died at 84, everyone suddenly became very emotional. At least in public. The funeral was packed. People cried, shared stories, talked about how much they loved him. But something felt fake. Even during the service, I caught relatives whispering about the inheritance. By the time the funeral ended, some of them seemed more excited than sad. 3 days later, we gathered at a lawyer's office for the reading of the will. The room felt tense. Everyone was trying to act calm. Nobody succeeded. The lawyer began reading. Properties were distributed. Investment accounts were assigned. Business shares were divided. One by one, family members received valuable assets. Victor received several commercial properties. Denise received vacation homes. Blake received a large investment portfolio. Everyone smiled. Everyone looked satisfied. Then the lawyer reached the end. He cleared his throat. "That concludes the will." The room went silent. Victor frowned. "You're forgetting, Ethan." The lawyer looked down at his papers. "No, mister. Carter intentionally left no financial assets to Ethan Carter." The room exploded. Blake actually laughed. "Seriously?" My Aunt Denise shook her head. "Wow." Victor leaned back in his chair with a smirk. "Guess we know who wasn't the favorite." More laughter followed. I sat there quietly, not angry, not even embarrassed, just confused. It didn't make sense. Grandpa and I had been close, closer than he'd been with anyone else in the family. The lawyer then reached into a folder. "There is one final item." He handed me a small envelope. "Your grandfather instructed me to give this only to you." Immediately, everyone's attention shifted. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded piece of paper. I unfolded it. There was only one sentence written in Grandpa's handwriting. "Trust the man with the silver watch." That was it. Nothing else. No explanation. No signature. Just that one sentence. Blake burst out laughing. "That's his inheritance?" Victor grinned. "Must be worth millions." The room filled with laughter. I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket. But something felt strange. Grandpa wasn't a man who did things without a reason. If he wrote that sentence, it meant something. I just didn't know what. That evening, most of the family gathered at Victor's house. Officially, it was a memorial dinner. In reality, it felt more like a celebration party. People drank expensive wine, laughed loudly, talked about renovations, vacations, and future investments. It made me sick. My grandfather had been dead less than a week, yet nobody seemed to miss him. Around 9 o'clock, I left. The rain had started falling heavily. I drove aimlessly for a while, trying to clear my head. Eventually, I stopped at an old gas station outside town. The place was almost empty. Just a few parked cars and a flickering light above the entrance. As I stepped out of the store carrying a coffee, I noticed an elderly man standing under the awning. He wasn't buying anything, wasn't talking to anyone. He was simply watching me. The moment our eyes met, he started walking toward me. Something about him immediately made me uneasy. He looked to be in his 70s, thin build, gray hair, dark overcoat. Then I noticed his wrist, a silver watch. My heart skipped a beat. The note. The man stopped a few feet away. "Ethan Carter?" I stared at him. "Yes." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he reached inside his coat. My body instantly tensed. Instead of a weapon, he pulled out a small package wrapped in faded brown paper. His hands trembled slightly. "I've been waiting 27 years to give this to you." I looked at the package. Then at him. "What?" He extended it toward me. "Your grandfather trusted me with it." The rain pounded against the pavement around us. "What is it?" The man glanced around nervously, then lowered his voice. "The reason your family celebrated today." A cold chill ran down my spine. "What does that mean?" His expression darkened. "Because they think they won." I stared at him. "Who are you?"
"My name is Samuel Reed. How did you know my grandfather?"
For a second, genuine sadness appeared in his eyes. "We were friends for over 40 years. I looked back at the package. "What is inside?" Samuel hesitated. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. "The truth." The word hung in the air.
"The truth about what?"
He looked directly at me. "About why your grandfather spent 27 years preparing for this moment." I felt my pulse quicken.
27 years. The same number he'd mentioned before.
"What are you talking about?"
Samuel swallowed hard. Then he spoke so quietly I almost didn't hear him.
"Everything your family believes about your past is a lie." My breath caught. "What?" He shook his head. "I can't explain here. Then explain somewhere else." "I can't."
"Why not?"
His face suddenly filled with fear. Real fear. The kind you don't fake. "Because some of the people who celebrated today would do anything to keep the truth buried." I stared at him. The rain continued falling around us. The package suddenly felt much heavier than it should have. Samuel stepped backward. "You need to go home. What if I have questions?" "You will." "And then?" He looked at me one last time. "When you open that package, you'll understand why your grandfather left you nothing." With that, he turned and walked into the darkness. I stood frozen beneath the gas station lights. My coffee slipped from my hand and hit the ground. I barely noticed because, for the first time all day, I felt something far stronger than grief, fear. Real fear. I drove home with the package sitting on the passenger seat. The entire way, I couldn't stop glancing at it. By the time I reached my apartment, my hands were shaking. I locked the door, closed every curtain, and placed the package on my kitchen table. The brown paper looked ancient. Carefully, I began unwrapping it, layer by layer, until finally something appeared underneath. A small metal lockbox. Rust covered the corners. A yellowed envelope was taped to the lid, and the moment I saw the handwriting on it, my heart nearly stopped. It was Grandpa's. Slowly, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. Just one sentence. "If you're reading this, they've already celebrated." My throat tightened. Then I turned the page over, and what I saw next changed everything I thought I knew about my family. For several seconds, I couldn't move. I just stared at the back of the page. Written beneath Grandpa's message was a name, Elizabeth Morgan, and underneath it another sentence. "Find out what happened to her." That was it. No explanation, no date, no clue who she was. Just a name. I read it 3 times, then 5, then 10. The more I looked at it, the more questions I had. Who was Elizabeth Morgan? Why had Grandpa hidden her name inside a package for 27 years? And what did any of this have to do with me? I barely slept that night. The next morning, I started searching. At first, I found nothing useful. Then, after hours of digging through old newspaper archives online, I found an article dated 27 years earlier. My stomach tightened immediately. The headline read, "Local woman disappears without a trace." The woman in the article was Elizabeth Morgan. According to the report, she had vanished suddenly at age 24. No body was found. No suspects were charged. No explanation was ever discovered. Eventually, the case went cold. I leaned back in my chair. 27 years. The same number Samuel had mentioned. This wasn't a coincidence. Not even close. I immediately drove to Samuel Reed's house. When he opened the door, he looked like he'd been expecting me. Without saying a word, he stepped aside and let me enter. His house was quiet. Old photographs covered the walls. Military medals sat inside display cases. The place felt frozen in time. I pulled the letter from my pocket. "Who is Elizabeth Morgan?" Samuel stared at the name. For a moment, his eyes became distant, sad, almost guilty. Then he quietly said, "Sit down." My pulse quickened. I sat. Samuel walked to a cabinet and removed an old photo album. Carefully, he opened it. Then he handed me a photograph. The moment I saw it, my breath caught. The woman in the picture looked familiar, very familiar. Same eyes, same smile, same facial features. I felt my chest tighten. She looked like me. Not exactly, but close enough to be family. My hands started shaking. "Who is she?" Samuel slowly sat across from me. Then he said words that shattered my world.
"Elizabeth Morgan was your mother." The room went silent. I stared at him, certain I'd heard him wrong. "My mother died."
Samuel didn't answer. "My family told me she died when I was a baby." His eyes filled with sadness. "Ethan, she didn't die." I felt the blood drain from my face.
"What? Your mother never died?"
I stood so quickly my chair nearly tipped over. "No." The word came out automatically. "No, that's impossible." Samuel remained calm. I wish it were. My mind was racing. My mother had died. I knew she had. I'd been told that my entire life, every birthday, every family gathering, every question I'd ever asked. The answer was always the same. She died, she died, she died, and now this stranger was telling me everything was a lie. Tell me the truth, I demanded. Samuel nodded. Then he told me a story nobody in my family ever wanted me to hear. 27 years earlier, Elizabeth Morgan had become engaged to a wealthy businessman connected to several members of the Carter family. While helping with financial records, she discovered evidence of massive fraud. Millions of dollars were being hidden through fake companies and illegal transactions. The deeper she looked, the more dangerous the truth became. And one of the people connected to it was my Uncle Victor. I felt sick. No. Samuel nodded. Your grandfather discovered it too. According to Samuel, Elizabeth planned to expose everything. But before she could, threats started arriving. Anonymous phone calls, letters, warnings. People wanted her silent. Then one night she disappeared. Officially, everyone claimed she was missing. Privately, Grandpa believed she was in danger, so he made a decision, a desperate decision, one that would affect the next 27 years. With help from trusted people, Elizabeth was secretly relocated under a new identity. She vanished from public records completely.
Even from most of the family, including me. I stared at Samuel. You're telling me my grandfather knew where she was? Samuel nodded.
Yes, anger exploded inside me. He let me believe she was dead. He let you stay alive. The room fell silent. Samuel leaned forward. Your grandfather believed that if the wrong people discovered Elizabeth was alive, both of you would be targets. I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream. But deep down, I could see the pain in Samuel's face. He believed every word. Then he handed me a flash drive. This is your inheritance. I looked at it. The tiny piece of plastic suddenly felt heavier than gold.
What is it?
27 years of evidence. That night, I plugged the drive into my computer. What I found left me speechless. Thousands of files, financial records, witness statements, bank transfers, photographs, recorded conversations, personal notes written by Grandpa himself. For 27 years, he had quietly investigated, collected proof, connected names, built a case, piece by piece, year after year. While everyone thought he was enjoying retirement, he had been preparing for a day he knew would eventually come. The day after his death. The day nobody would suspect what he had truly left behind. Suddenly, everything made sense. The will, the package, the stranger, the note. Grandpa hadn't left me money because money wasn't the real inheritance. The truth was, for 3 days I barely slept. I reviewed every file, every recording, every document. By the end, there was no doubt. The evidence was real, and it was devastating. I had two choices: destroy everything, or expose it. Either decision would change my life forever. On the 4th day, I made my choice. I contacted federal investigators. Then I handed over everything, every file, every document, every piece of evidence Grandpa had spent 27 years collecting. The fallout was immediate. Victor called me first. His voice was filled with rage.
You stupid idiot.
I remained silent.
Do you have any idea what you've done?
Yes, my answer surprised even me. For the first time in my life.
I do.
He hung up. Over the following weeks, investigators moved quickly. Search warrants were issued. Financial records were seized. Businesses were audited. Hidden accounts were uncovered. The deeper investigators dug, the more they found. Then arrests began, one after another. People who had spent years pretending to be respectable suddenly found themselves facing criminal charges. The same family members who laughed during the will reading stopped laughing. Panic replaced confidence. Fear replaced arrogance. And then came the biggest shock of all. 6 months later, investigators informed me they had successfully located Elizabeth, my mother. She was alive, actually alive. I remember sitting in complete silence after the call ended. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. For 29 years, I'd believed she was dead. Now I was being told she was waiting to meet me. Our meeting happened 3 weeks later. In a small cafe hundreds of miles away. I arrived early. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time the door opened, my heart jumped. Then it happened. The door swung open, and she walked inside. For a moment, the entire world seemed to stop. She looked older than the photograph. Of course she did. 27 years had passed. But the resemblance was undeniable. The same eyes staring back at me, the same smile, the same face I'd unknowingly seen every morning in the mirror. Tears filled her eyes instantly, then mine. Neither of us knew what to say. Finally, she whispered one word, Ethan. That was all it took. I stood, she stood, and we hugged. Years of loss, years of questions, years of loneliness, all crashing together in a single moment. Neither of us wanted to let go. Later, we talked for hours, then days, then weeks. She told me everything, how much she'd missed me, how often she'd secretly followed updates about my life, how Grandpa had protected us both, how every decision he'd made came from love, even the painful ones. especially the painful ones. And finally, I understood. The reason Grandpa left me nothing publicly wasn't because he loved me less. It was because he loved me more. The moment the family believed I'd received nothing, they stopped paying attention to me. They underestimated me, ignored me, dismissed me, and that gave me the freedom to uncover the truth. A year later, my life looked completely different. Most of the people who celebrated at Grandpa's funeral were gone from my life. Some were serving prison sentences. Others disappeared when the money disappeared. But for the first time, I wasn't alone. I had my mother, I had answers, and I finally understood the man my grandfather truly was. One evening, I visited his grave alone. The sun was setting. The cemetery was quiet. I stood there for a long time. Then I placed a chess piece on his headstone. A king, our favorite piece, and I smiled, because I finally understood the lesson he'd spent years trying to teach me. Money can buy loyalty. Money can buy attention. Money can even buy silence, but truth always costs more. And the people willing to pay that price are the ones who discover who they really are. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what someone leaves in your hands. It's the truth they trust you to carry after they're gone.